Oh, I should have waited for him to summon more ends. Oh! Dead center. Dead center. 75 mil. 75 million damage. There's another M. No freaking way. That's a 219. What? I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Yo guys, what is up? Max in the Wonderlands video, and today I've got a follow-up on my Plaguebringer build video. Now, Plaguebringer is a Contagion build that specializes in status effects, and ever since putting out that video, I've gotten a lot of suggestions for different things to try. Now, this is a setup that I've hit for over 400 million damage with, and just does absolutely absurd damage, but getting it to be consistent can be kind of difficult. And so I found some really weird weapons that you maybe never think of ever using, and weird spells to try that have given me some pretty crazy and consistent results for Contagion. So I wanted to make this video kind of showcasing some of the craziest spells and weapons that maybe you wouldn't think to use. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So real quick, before we get into the gear and spells, I just want to say that these are in addition to the guns and spells that I showcased in the Plaguebringer build video. I showcased the Crossblade, the Livewire, and the White Rider, which are all really strong, but there's so many options and so many cool, unique weapons that you can use with Contagion that work really well. So that's the point of this video. Also, if you do not know what Contagion is, it's a skill in the Stabbomancer tree that gives you a chance to spread dots. These dots can spread from the enemy you're shooting at back to an enemy next to it, and then back to the enemy you're shooting at, and they can spread as many times as possible given your spread chance. And every time that they spread, they get all of your status effect damage increases, meaning when you shoot at a group of enemies, you can get a dot that hits for absolutely ridiculous damage. And so that's what the guns and spells on this list are going to be focused on. If you want a full breakdown of Contagion, check out the Plaguebringer build video, which will be in the description and the pinned comment, where I have like a 6-minute explanation. But just know that Contagion can give us some really crazy damage, but it's kind of RNG based. So the first piece of gear I want to mention, and this is in no particular order, is the Queen's Cry. Now you're looking for a Queen's Cry with the Taser mode, and you'll know it has the Taser mode on it if you see the blue text highly effective versus wards at the bottom. The Queen's Cry has a Taser mode that procs very quick gun critical hits. This is gun critical hit, and it will chain between enemies. Now these chains can apply status effects, and more importantly, every gun critical hit has a chance to proc Executioner's Blade. Executioner's Blade is a melee attack that it will guarantee proc Alchemic Agent with our status effect, or with our gears, the way that we have our build set up. So we're constantly chaining lightning damage that will constantly be spawning Executioner's Blade, constantly proccing melee critical hits to spawn that will deal status effect damage, and we're gonna have that damage be hitting multiple enemies because we've got this like chains. These tasers will chain to multiple enemies, and I found this to be a very consistent way to do really fast boss kills and kills, because you're just guaranteeing yourself a bunch of Executioner Blade procs and a bunch of status effect procs, and that's one of the coolest ways that I've been rocking with Contagion. Up next is the Message Pistol. Now this will roll with a very high status effect chance of 25% with a really high dot of 1,742, and this thing does decent AoE damage, which is super important because we want to be hitting multiple enemies to proc a bunch of dots on different enemies to give us high chances, and it kind of like splashes around. It shoots a fish, which will splash around. I found this thing very, very good for proccing crazy Contagion status effects and damage. Plus, it's super consistent because it's got a big AoE, and that high status effect chance really helps it out. Next up, we've got launchers. Now, I've got a Blue Cake and a Cannonballer here. Both have some of the highest status effect damage in the entire game with good chances. I just want to note, though, that I found like a lot of difficulty proccing Contagion with these. I did want to mention them because they do have high dot damage and high status effect, but for some reason I can't like consistently, even remotely close to as consistently as I can get Contagion to work with the other weapons. When I have hit Contagion procs with these things, they're usually a ton of damage, these launchers, but I wouldn't like seek them out specifically for this build because I've had a lot of trouble with getting them to work. But if you can get a Contagion proc to proc with a base damage of 5,000 versus our 400 mil, for example, proc with like a 624 damage, you could see some absolutely ridiculous numbers. But once again, I find consistency to be better here than just like big, as much damage as possible, rarely. Next up, I mentioned this in my like actual build video, but the gelatinous cube is seriously good for this setup. It's got very high like you can get it to bounce and hit a ton of different enemies, and it leaves these pools which will splash and hit a bunch of enemies and cause status effects everywhere, and it's got a really high chance to apply those status effects, and it's got a really high dot damage. The gelatinous cube is one of the best. However, the real reason I made this video is for this next spell. And lastly, the reason I made this video and wanted to share some of these things is because there's a lot of cool ways to apply crazy dots with Contagion, but one of the best and most consistent ways is with the inflammation spell. Now, the inflammation spell is a very quick flame burst that will hit enemies multiple times, and has a 110% chance for a status effect. It is guaranteed status effects when you're hitting an enemy with this spell, and all of those guaranteed status effects are really good chances of proccing Contagion, and it comes with a decent dot. While this is not the best dot, the fact that it is guaranteed to be applying and you have multiple chances with multiple charges because you're going to be like holding this down and casting a flame, I found it to be very consistent for proccing Contagion. And even though the actual like Contagion procs from this thing aren't as high as something like a gelatinous cube or like the message or like the blue cake, I found that it's been very consistent for just like absurd damage. Now, once again, this is RNG based, and your odds of doing crazy damage are so much better if there are enemies nearby whatever you're hitting. However, you still have a chance to do absurd damage if it's just a solo target, and I found the inflammation to be one of the most reliable ways, once again, still RNG based, but one of the most reliable ways to proc crazy Contagion damage. If you're wondering the setup and all the gear that's required to deal crazy damage with Contagion, check out the Plaguebringer build. Once again, that will be in the description, but I just wanted to share with you guys that this spell is not getting any use. However, it does have a very niche use with Contagion, and it's really good with that niche use. So yeah, guys, all of these things are really fun to experiment with. I strongly recommend you experimenting with different gear, with different spells that have high status effect chance, because it seems like status effect chance is actually one of the most important aspects in getting Contagion to work consistently, which definitely makes sense. I'll catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.